So, hello, good day everyone. So, our topic for today, it's all about the chapter 4. So, welcome to the midterms coverage. Okay, so in chapter 4, we will tackle about the steps in ethical decision making. Okay? So, this is the flow of our topic, which is the lesson 1. We have the ethical reasoning. Lesson 2, we have the principle of beneficence. Lesson 3, step or guide to ethical decision. Lesson 4, the ethical decision making model by Sean Taylor Model. Okay? So first, let's go to lesson 1, which is the ethical reasoning. Okay? So when we say reason, it's the capacity for consciously making sense of things, establishing and verifying facts, applying logic, and changing or justifying practices, institution, beliefs on new or existing information. Okay? So reasons is very common around the world. Okay? Even you use reasons. Ang dami-dami yung rason. Ganyan-ganyan. Kapag inutusan kayo ng mga magulang nyo, ang dami nyong rason. Kapag maghugas kayo ng plato, ang dami nyong rason. Kapag magte-take ka ng exam, ang dami nyong rason. Kapag may tinanong si teacher, ganito, ganyan, ang dami nyong rason. Okay, so reason is the cause for something to happen or the power of your brain to think, okay, to understand and to engage in logical thought or logical thinking. Okay, so one of the example is when you are late, okay, late ka because your car ran out of gas, or dahil late ka nagising, or dahil nakipag-chat ka kay boyfriend mo or girlfriend mo, dahil napuyat ka at na-late ka ng gising. Okay? So, an example of reason is the ability to think logically. Okay, sasabihin mo kay teacher mo, sorry sir, na-late po kasi ako kasi kagabi po, nagtrabaho po ako, gumawa pa ako ng project. Sir, sorry po, hindi na po mauulit. Sir, ganito po, traffic po kasi sa plaza kahit hindi naman. Okay, so to use the faculty of reason or the human reason, think logically. Okay, so that is reason. Okay, so role of ethical reasoning is we have the two, okay? Those which enhance the well-being of others or yung pinipraise mo. Okay, those that harm or diminish the well-being of others. It's very rampant nowadays yan. Okay? Na may mga tao na pinipraise tayo. Okay? And with those praises is we tend to develop, we tend to grow as professional. Okay, nag-grow tayo because of that praises. But sometimes, criticisms are make us lowered our self-esteem. Okay, kapag kinikriticize tayo, is we tend not to come out to our shell so that we could give the best of us, the best shot of us. Okay, so developing one's ethical reasoning abilities is crucial. Why? Because there is in human nature a strong tendency toward egotism. Okay, the prejudice, self-jurisdiction, and self-deception. Okay? So reasons have everything to do with ethics. If you have no good reasons for an act or belief, then you can't have thought it through very well, and maybe you shouldn't be doing it or believing it at all. Okay? So it is quite scary to think that there are people out there who are voting, okay, who are protesting, financing causes or running campaigns without any clear idea of why they are doing it. Okay, so each and every one of us should have a clear about our reasons of our values, our beliefs, and even our behaviors, so that we should be able to give a reasoned account of them to others. Okay? Impartiality. Okay? So when we say impartiality, dito is even-handedness or fair-mindedness. Okay? What does it mean? It makes no discrimination as nationality, race, okay? With our religious beliefs, in our class, in political opinions, because each endeavors to relieve the suffering of individuals, being guided solely by their needs and to give the priority to the most urgent cases of distress. Okay? So meron tayong tinatawag dito na cultural relativism. Okay? It is the ability to understand culture on its own terms and not to make judgments using the standards of one's own culture. Okay, the goal of this is to promote understanding of cultural practices that are not typically part of one's own culture. In layman's terms, sa madaling salita, huwag mo ikumpara ang kultura mo sa ibang kultura dahil ang kultura mo ay naiiba sa kultura nila. Yun ang gusto yung sabihin. Okay? So when we judge someone's culture, we should always see the criteria on the objective type. Okay? Huwag yung sa subjective type, huwag natin ikumpara sa sarili natin. Just like for example, the Muslims, part of their Sharia law, is pwede mag-asawa ang lalaki more than 2 as long as kaya niyang buhayin. Okay? So, sa part natin sa Roman Catholic, okay? Sa Catholic, hindi siya pwede. It's against God. Okay? Very immoral para sa atin na mag-asawa ka ng higit pa sa 2. Okay? So, those two cultures have different perceptions regarding on the marriage. But hindi natin sinasabi na mali na ang kultura ng mga Muslims. Okay? Meron silang fina-follow yan. Meron din tayong fina-follow. So don't ever judge or compare the two cultures. Okay? Just accept it. Just read and watch what they are doing. Kasi kung tayo sa part naman din natin is may mga bawal din para sa kanila. Pagkain ng baboy, okay? Kumakain tayo ng baboy, which is bawal, very sacred sa kanila ang pagkain ng baboy. Okay, so we should always think on the differences. We should always think on the uniqueness of every culture of us. Just like for example, the Korea and the Philippines. Kapag sa Korea kasi, kapag maingay ka kumain, one of their culture is kapag maingay ka kumain, nasasarapan ka sa pagkain nila. Nasasarapan ka sa pagkain and it's a sign of respect para dun sa nagluto. Okay, sa atin kasi is kadugyutan. Okay, para tayong parang baboy kumakain. Okay, so one thing is kinakailangan natin to know the culture of others so that we should not be ignorant. Okay? Para matigil na yung away-away. Okay, so that is the impartiality. Okay, the even-handedness and the fair-mindedness. We should always judge. Okay, kung palagi kong inuulit, we should always judge on what is the objective standard, not on the subjective standard. Okay, so next is we have, ayan, I have here the example. Why does she wear those clothes and that thing on her head? Okay? So she should be able to wear whatever she wants. Over here, we see someone judging a person of a Muslim faith for their clothing. Diba? So, nawawala na yung teorya ng cultural relativism. Okay? Okay, so we have here the predicting consequences. Okay, so when we say predicting consequences, it is the moral involves in predicting the consequences of an action before we act. Okay? Before we act. Ito yung palagi kong inuulit-ulit sa inyo na in every decisions, in every actions we do, we must see to it the consequences bago natin gawin. Okay, kailangan lang that may precaution na nangyayari because there are always consequences when we take the action we think is right and when we try to be good person, and usually this include unintended as well as intended outcomes. Okay, so kinakailangan dapat ine-extract natin yung mga consequences, yung mga challenges dun sa decisions natin before we act. Okay? We must remember, however, that before we act, we can never know what the consequences will be. Okay? Therefore, we should take care in predicting what result from acting on ethical presumptions. In doing ethics, we look at rules, okay? Yung duties, the rights, okay? And stories. Okay, the characters and the relationships, to construct a presumption, and then it tests this presumption by predicting what we do now, what we do know or don't know about likely consequences of acting on it. Okay, so in deciding on important matters, no approach is more appropriate than a moral one. Okay, so morality, after all, it is first and foremost a matter of consulting reason. Okay, so given that feelings sometimes get the better of people when choosing where to stand on the issues, sound moral reasoning must play an even more critical role. Okay, so it is not enough that one simply imagines oneself with one's own interests, okay, in the place those of others persons. Rather, one just imagine oneself as being in their place while having or in turn their interests and desires. Okay? So next we have, okay, you have to relate to practice. Okay, reason only informs you about the transpired and how. So in assessing moral value of an incident, will you base your moral valuation solely on feelings? How do you think can moral impartiality help in resolving a societal issues such as racism and sexism? Okay, so try to relate that. Next is we are in a lesson 2, which is the principle of beneficence. Beneficence here is the generic definition of beneficence is an act of charity, the mercy, and the kindness. An example of this is what has become known as random act of kindness. Si Ivana, dun sa vlog niya, tinutulungan niya yung mga nag-vendor sa kalye, sa street. Okay? She is acting beneficence. Okay? It's because beneficent actions and motives have traditionally occupied a central place in morality. Common example today are found in social welfare programs, the scholarships for needy, the meritorious students. Okay, so communal support of health-related research, okay? The policies to improve the welfare of animals, okay? Disaster relief, okay? Nung bagyo, okay? Nung nabaha ang Cagayan, okay? Madaming mga tumulong, madaming mga relief goods na bumaba dito sa Cagayan at madaming mga taong nagbigay ng mga pagkain, ng tulong sa bawat Cagayanos. Okay? Those are simply an act of kindness. Another example is the programs to benefit children and the incompetent and the parental hiring and admission policies. Okay, and also more is the actions given by your barangay to help your humanity, to help its citizens. Okay, yung mga livelihood program, mga ganyan. Basta yung act of kindness, those are the beneficence. Okay? So those are the act of kindness in general. But beneficent is an ethical principle that addresses the idea that a nurse's actions should promote good. Okay? Doing good is thought of as doing what is best for the patient. Beneficence should not be confused with the closely related ethical principle of non-maleficence, which states that one should not do harm to patients ang non-maleficence. The principle acts as obligation for nurses to protect patients from harm by removing and preventing bad situations and promoting good ones. Okay, so nurses need to be careful that in their haste to take care of the patients, that they do not insert what they perceive to be most good for what patient would perceive to be the most and perfect good. For example, a patient wishes to withdraw cancer treatment because he feels his quality of his life is more important than living longer. Okay, for this patient, it would be practicing beneficence for the nurse to advocate for the patient and arrange for cancer treatment to be stopped. Okay, even the nurse wants the patient's treatment to be continued. She must put patient's idea of a good life. Okay, so persons engaged in medical practice, okay, public health, Okay? It appreciates that risk of harm presented by interventions must often be weighed against possible benefit for patients. One of the rampant and current issues nowadays is the pandemic. Okay? So, kahit alam na ng mga doctors, ang mga nurses, ang mangyayari sa kanila, they always take the risk to help the humanity, to cure the COVID-19 virus. Okay? So, there is always a professional obligations are deeply informed by their commitments to prevent or reduce harm, to produce a positive balance of goods over the inflicted harms. Okay? So next is we have the step in ethical. Okay, but before that, I have here case analysis. Okay, so answer the following question after comprehending the case presented below. Okay, so as I said again, comment down your name, your course, and then your answer. Okay, if one of your family members is about to put to jail for something he had done wrong, how will you react on this scenario? And to what extent would you take risk of saving him or her? Will you let your feelings get the best of you, or will you let your sound moral reasoning take part? Explain your answer in not more than 100 words. Okay, lesson 3, which is the step guide to ethical decision. We have the 7 step in guides to ethical decision making and moral reasoning. Okay? So first is state the problem. Okay? Determine the possible moral dilemmas at hand. Is there something about your judgment or decision that make you uncomfortable, or is there any conflict of interest present? Okay? Alangan naman pupunta ka sa next step kung hindi mo alam kung anong problema mo. Alangan mag-state ka ng problem kung wala kang problema. So we should always think to know what our problems is, so that para makapag-conclude tayo and we can come up with the moral dilemma. We could come up with the good decisions. Okay? So next, step 2 is check the facts. Okay? When I say check the facts, when we examine a scenario closely, what is initially identified as a problem or dilemma can surprisingly disappear. Okay, some on the other hand can be amplified or altered radically due to new details that might come to light upon closer scrutiny. Okay? Next is identify the relevant factors. Okay? When I say identify relevant factors, who are the people involved? Okay? What loads or professional codes can be possibly applied, or are there practical constraints? For example, you are a journalist and you were given 5,000 Philippine money, okay, by a politician whom the article you are currently writing is about. Will the money create conflict of interest? Yes, of course naman, right? So we should always think on the relevant factors, okay? Yung mga maaaring ma-involve sa decisions mo. Okay, sino yung mga magsasuffer, sino ang mga magbe-benefits. Okay? Next is develop a list of options. When I say develop a list of options, do you have a set of alternatives to the actions or decisions in relation to a given scenario in mind? Be creative and develop a list of other choices. Okay, so avoid the binarism of yes or no. Okay? Identify the people you can potentially approach who may provide fresh perspective on the situation you are confronted with. Okay? Next is test the options. In test options, we have a lot of tests. Okay? By Michael Davis has included several tests that may be proved to be useful when one is weighing in or her choices and decisions. First is yung harm test. Okay? Would less harm be done on the other people when I favor this one decision over the others? Okay? Just like for example, magpapatayo ka ng babuyan, I should say. Magpapatayo ka ng babuyan as your business. You are always think on the harm test. Okay? Meron siyang side effects sa health natin. Okay? We should always think on the environment around you. Alangan magpapatayo ka ng babuyan sa gitna ng city. But we should always think on the health protocols. Okay? So publicity test would Would I be proud of this decision if one makes the winning news? Would I want would I want my loved ones to know? Okay, so in the publicity test, a person's actions manifest essential elements of his or her character. What we do reveals who we are. Okay, our actions provides others with a window thought which they can preview or which they can view our results. Okay, so under this test, when I contemplate an action, I ask whether I would want to be known as kind of persons who would do this. Okay, so for example, if the actions were cowardly, I would want to be known as a coward. Okay, if the actions were irresponsible, would I want to be revealed to myself as well as to others as irresponsible? Diba? So this test encapsulates the approach known as virtue ethics. So when I say virtue ethics is less about how right or wrong a particular actions is or more than about the character of a person. Okay? So in these tests, the actions is judged in terms of what it says about the persons rather than on the effects of the actions may have. Okay? So next is defensibility test. Would I be able to defend this decision before the court or panel or reviewers without appearing self-serving? Diba? So next is reversibility test. Okay? Would I still prefer my option of choice of if it is were to have some adverse effects on me instead of others, or would I still want it despite the implications? Okay, so when we say reversibility test, it captures a central idea in the Kantian formalism. Okay, so it is the idea of universalizing one's actions. It is also the main behind the golden rule. Okay, so positively, it tells us to do others what we do have them to do us. Okay, so negatively, it tells us not to subject anybody to something when we would be unwilling to have them subject us to it. Okay, so we are treating reversibility as a key procedure to asking the universalizing questions. Would I recommend that all person in this solution act this way? Okay, so in short, reversibility, kung anong gusto mong gawin sa'yo, is gawin mo rin sa kanila. Okay? Yun yung gusto ng reversibility test. Kung gusto mong ito, okay, gusto ko irespeto ako ng mga ibang tao, pero how will people respect me? Respect them. That is reversibility test. Okay, so when we say colleague test is how would my profession's ethics committee see the option? What would they say? Okay, when we say colleague test naman is in every decisions we take, we must see to it or ilagay natin yung paa natin sa paa ng may ibang tao. Kasi para alamin mo kung anong sasabihin or kung ano ang mga consequences sa decisions mo. Did you get what I mean? I hope so. So, when we say organization test is what would my companies or organization ethics officials or legal counsel say regarding to the options. Alright? So virtue test is what kind of person would also choose such as an option. Is he, she who someone might consider as a virtuous? Would I become of me if I enact this option all the time? Okay, so these are the series. Okay, so ang 6 steps naman is come with a choice or decision based on the above mentioned steps. 7 is review steps 1 to 6. Okay, what can you do to prevent making such a decision again? What are the precautions to take? What changes should be affected on organizational and personal level? Mga ganyan. Okay, so there are a series of basic questions that should be asked when confronted with ethical dilemmas. These are the often complex situations with no clear-cut resolution and without a right or wrong answer. But these decision-making processes will go a long way towards helping all of us make informed decisions that can justify consequent actions. Okay, so So we should always think on the processes so that we could conclude, we could come up with a good decisions, we could come up with a good actions. Okay? So next is we have the ethical decision making model of Sean Taylor model. Okay, so in here, Sean Taylor's presentations the Geoethics Forums given at the 2014 Teaching Geoethics Workshop provided a simple model to help students engage in ethical decision making that includes the context or facts of the situation, the stakeholders, the decision makers. This inform in the number of alternate choices that is mediated through the evaluation of impacts of negotiations among other parties that lead to selection of an optimal choice. Okay, so may papakita ako mamaya later. Okay, so Sean Taylor's presentation, it provides guidance for what makes a good ethical dilemma discussion, including, okay, we have the trust, the respect, disagreement without personal attacks, being judgmental versus making a judgment. Okay, there is two difference between judgmental. Ang judgmental kasi it can be positive or a negative. Okay, so when we say positive judgment, it's more on praising. Okay, kapag negative judgment, it's more on the reinforcement. Okay? Pag sinabi kasi natin bad judgments, yan na kasi is, ang notion kasi natin is, hindi na natin tinitingnan or we are affected. Okay? Mas nangingibabaw na ang emotions natin. Pero, it's more on the reinforcement. In order for us to know our lapses, kung ano ang mga kulang sa atin, so that we could develop, okay, para mas lalo tayong mag-grow. Okay, accept na natin yung mga bad judgments so that magkapag-grow tayo as a good individual and a good and responsible citizens of this world. Okay, so emphasize process versus conclusion. Okay, uncertainty is okay, description then prescription. So an ethical decision making model is a tool that can be used by healthcare providers to help develop the ability to think through an ethical dilemma and arrive to an ethical decision. Okay, so these models considers the ethical principles, the obligations, and the values. Okay, so ito na yun, yung Sean Taylor's presentation sa summary niya. It's the ethical decision making. Okay, so thank you so much. Stay safe and God bless. Bye-bye.